Good evening, and welcome to Making Michigan, the Bentley Historical Library's series on the history of the University of Michigan. I'm Andrew Rutledge, Bentley historian and research associate, and I'm very pleased to welcome you all tonight to the historic Detroit Observatory, a division of the Bentley, and I also want to welcome our online audience on YouTube. Thank you all very much for coming out on this late September evening. Tonight, we have an exciting and, considering the little athletic event going on this Saturday around noon, I think, very timely talk. For over a century, athletics, and particularly football, has played a central role in the life of America's colleges and universities. And as you all know, the University of Michigan is no exception to this. Indeed, it was a leading institution in the development of college sports in the early 20th century and continues to be at their forefront to this day. Our speaker this evening is Greg Dooley, who has been thinking and teaching about college athletics in all their varied glories and controversies for well over 2 decades. Now, my undergraduate days were at a relatively small school. We didn't have a football team. The basketball team played in the student gym. And so you can probably imagine how stunned I was when I came to Ann Arbor as a graduate student more years ago than I'm going to talk about and saw Michigan Stadium. I was so just stunned and amazed at its size and the history that it represented that all sorts of wild ideas came across my head, and some of them I still want to believe. The most prominent being the fact that that giant eagle statue in the southeast corner of the stadium is actually a trophy we took from the University of Iowa Hawkeyes. I've been told that's not true, but my heart wants to believe. But there are a lot of other trophies and traditions in college sports, and the legends about them very rarely come close to the more complicated and often, sometimes less glorious truth. And perhaps nowhere is this complication more true than in regards to one of the most emblematic objects in college sports, and the subject of tonight's talk, the little brown jug. This clay water bottle, which, well, you can't see in this photo, but you'll see plenty of it, is the prize of the oldest and most played rivalry in college football between the University of Michigan and the University of Minnesota. Now, Greg Dooley is going to tell us a little about that history tonight. And as a full-time lecturer in the Marsal Family School of Education, he teaches courses all about the history of college athletics on subjects also like the history of leadership through coaching and issues around education and equity in name, image, and likeness, which are transforming college sports over the last couple of years. He's also a devoted Michigan sports fan, having covered the history and culture of Michigan sports for well over 20 years in his website, mvictors.com. He also frequently appears as a guest on local radio shows, history documentaries, and as a speaker for university teams and alumni groups. And I could testify, from having seen him both in the classroom and having chatted with him, he's just a wonderful storyteller. So please join me in welcoming Greg Dooley.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you all for coming. Thank you for all the people who signed up online. One of my requirements for Andrew, I watched a few of these, and everyone kind of stands back here, and I don't do that. And I want to give you experience how I teach in the classroom, my style, how I teach in the classroom. But first, not only a thank you to Andrew, but I want to say something. 2 men are here, Brian Williams, Greg Kinney, from the Bentley Historical Library, who have helped me with my research for 20 years when I was a snotty kid going in there looking at old Michigan dailies and all that stuff. None of this happens. None of this happens. This class, my career, none of it happens without the work of the Bentley Historical Library, and particularly thank you guys very much. I also have to acknowledge the holy or unholy trinity of Johns. I'm talking about John Crick, John Behe, and John Bacon. Does anyone know John Bacon, by the way? Hey, all right. He's the course founder of 2 of my classes I teach, including the history of college athletics. And he's also, interestingly enough, the reason why I'm usually asked to speak, because there's no bacon and no bread. Those are usually the conditions, just like tonight. I'm third on the list after a few other people. Okay, so we are going to talk about the jug tonight. I am going to move very fast. There will be no quiz, okay? It is recorded. We will get to the jug, but I do need to set some historical context for you first to set the stage for how all this happened. And I want to ask a question. Are we currently in the wildest period in college athletics history? Are we? It is wild. The transfer portal, players leaving. Is it destroying college football? Facilities arms races. There's a barber shop in Schembeckler Hall right now. I don't need it, but the players apparently do. Conference changes in tension. Tony Petitti. Sign stealing. Oh, is that too soon? Okay. Coaching pay. Players quitting. It's a new headline. Boosters, NL, NIL collectives, oh my. We pay players. Blatantly. Money seems to be the cry. It's going to be the curse, if not the downfall. Nick Saban, I'm quitting coaching. My wife thinks the sport is ruined. But I offer to you that history doesn't repeat itself, but it often rhymes. That, of course, is Mark Twain, not Greg Dooley. All right, I take you to 1869, the first game in college football history. Who wins this game? Rutgers. And this remains the most significant win in the history of the Rutgers program. I'm sorry to say, sorry, Dad, who went to Rutgers. 1879, there's the first team at Michigan. We are the first team in the West. We play the first game. We win the first game. And suddenly, Michigan establishes itself as the big bullies in Western football. In other words, not East, not Ivy League. 1892, another group of people have an idea. They want to create an Ivy League quality school that's not named Michigan in the city of Chicago. How do you do that? What do you need? Of course you need students, but before any of that, guess what you need, folks? A lot of money. And guess who they went to? A man with a lot of money. He's got a lot. You guys know his name? It's synonymous with money. That's J.D. Rockefeller. He hires a guy named Amos Alonzo Stagg. Who's heard this name before? His name is displayed at least 3 times in Schembeckler Hall. His name alone adorns the Big Ten championship trophy today. He is from Yale. He is a great coach. And before they even put the doorknobs on the school doors, they've hired a football coach. Okay? Understand how important it is. They realized it. They had the money. They had the backing. And they found their guy. They got good pretty fast. 1894. Michigan's playing Chicago on Thanksgiving Day. They used to play on Thanksgiving Day. This is well before the Lions, okay? November 29th, we're playing Chicago. Chicago scores first, 4-0. Touchdowns used to be worth 4 points. Then they were 5, eventually 6. They score first. Michigan's offense can't move the ball. What's going on? What's going on? We're having trouble here. I take you back 12 days earlier. Michigan's playing a game against Oberlin College, and guess who is the referee? Amos Alonzo Stagg. That's interesting. Let's go 5 days before the game. Michigan plays a huge game in Detroit against Cornell. This is a big chance. Michigan wins this game. Stagg was there with some of his players, watching. Where am I going with this? So back to that Thanksgiving Day game. This is a huge time. Michigan's down 4-0. Michigan suddenly realizes it. That son of a bitch, Stagg, stole our signs. Our quarterback barks out signals, and they know them all. Why? Because Stagg was watching. He was taking notes when he was a referee, when he was scouting us. They figured out our signals. So at the end of the game, we realized it, and we whispered to this guy. We go, hey, I'm going to bark out right. You go left. They gave the ball to this guy. He scored, and Michigan won. Michigan Daily. Chicago knew our signals. They stole our signals. It started a battle back and forth with the newspapers accusing each other. And here's the Chicago paper in 1894. In the first place, it is and always has been regarded as perfectly legitimate to get the signals of the opposing team in whatever way possible. They stole our signs. We move on. 1896. Harper's Weekly, a journal of civilization. This is civilized people out east. What's going on in this wilderness in the West? No one in the East has the conception of the rottenness of the whole structure. Players are being paid. Men are bought and sold like cattle to play. This is a prominent writer. All the elite people, oh, the West, right? But not Michigan? What do you think? Do you think maybe at Michigan? Maybe, I don't know. Charles Baird, effectively the athletic director, is the organizer of the team. And our buddy who ran that little play at the end of the game, that's Dutch Ferbert, we find at the Bentley Library a little exchange between these two. Let's take a look. I will send you to college this fall. I will secure you a loan from a friend for $400. That seems, all right. Well, let's continue. There must be absolute secrecy about the matter. We must take no chance this leaking out. You will be asked to sign a certificate. You receive no money. We must keep our mouth shut. Stiff upper lip is actually in there. Return this letter. Anyone want to know why maybe they wanted this letter returned? Any guesses? What's that? So I wouldn't be showing it to people like you 130 years later. He didn't want this getting out, okay? Direct payments evolved to loans, evolved to fake jobs. Alumni associations got together. They worked with local companies. They gave them money. Coaches made promises. Players went to go to their job, okay, and got paid. Does this sound familiar to anybody? I'm going to change one name of one group here. I'm going to change that to a collective. Does it now sound very familiar? This is exactly the same thing that's going on with collectives right now today. Okay, 1896. The Big Ten is formed in part, and one of the big reasons was to control all of this. Okay, we got to get a hold on these partial players. These 7 teams are the original 7 teams, the Big Ten. Okay, they meet in Chicago and form this group. 1898, Thanksgiving Day, a game again. Michigan beats Chicago. Gustav Ferber, our buddy, is the coach. Louis Elbel writes the victors, our fight song, okay? 1899, the Big Ten expands. Iowa, Indiana joined the Big Ten, all right?
What were they called when you were 7?
They were originally the Intercollegiate Conference of Faculty Representatives. By the way, this is also buried at the Bentley. The term conference. What does that mean? My buddy hears this, where do you go to a sales conference, right? That's a meeting of people with like-minded interests. That's what the name of the meeting was on the letterhead. They weren't sure what to call themselves. They just said, let's just call ourselves the name of the meeting. That's the word origin of conference, not league, not association. It actually comes from the meeting. Then, but informally, it was called the Western Conference, and only when it became 9 did they start to use the term Big 9. Eventually became, Michigan left, we'll talk about that in a minute. Ohio State came in, became the Big 10 in the 20s. Okay, but great question. Gus Ferbert doesn't want to coach anymore. He's the coach of that team. He actually goes and mines for gold up in the Yukon. Apparently, he uses his grit, which won victories, to find gold up north, and he leaves. Coaching is not a normal profession. 1900, Minnesota. They want their version of Stag. They hire a guy, Doc Williams from Yale. They want their own version of Stag. We'll get back to Doc Williams in a second. All right, meanwhile, after a devastating defeat in Chicago in 1900, the Michigan Daily sums it up this way: we have a disaster on our hands, folks. We have a disaster. Stag beat us. They write, the Anvil Chorus is out in full force at Michigan. The knock-knock of hammers, great and small, is heard all over campus and will continue until a winning team can get back to the fickle sympathies of her student body. Football is important. We need our version of Stag. Now, and we find this guy, the disruptor. That's Fielding H. Yost. Fielding H. Yost, years prior, is working his way across the country, first at West Virginia, then Ohio Wesleyan, Nebraska. He makes a stop in Kansas. This man is there coaching the basketball team. James Naismith, the inventor of basketball. Coincidentally, ironically, he has the worst record in Kansas coaching history in basketball. It's true. He's the only Kansas coach with a losing record. But he's there, and he sees this big dude on campus who shows up. His name is George. He says, gosh, George, you're a big kid. You should go see Yost, this new coach. You should go play football. Just go give it a try. So there's George Krebs. He's this big, strapping lad in the team photo. They win a championship with Yost. There's Yost. It's, Yost holds him out and plays him in the end of the season. And they win, and they beat their rival, and everything was great. And it's almost like George had played football before. It's uncanny how natural he was on the football field. 3 years earlier, we have a photo of him with, his name is Krebs, not Krebs. He played football with Fielding Yost. Fielding Yost snuck him, told him to come to campus on the slide, didn't tell anybody, and they played.
Yost goes across the country, finishes at Stanford, comes back to Michigan. Here's his contract. This is at the Bentley Historical Library. Notice anything interesting about it. Most of the football coaches back then were full-time teachers as well, or PE or something like that. He is hired as a hired gun to coach the football team, and exclusively during the football season. He doesn't even live on campus. You're here to win. We're tired of the disaster that Stagg created. Minnesota's got a guy. We need to win now. You're our guy. We don't care. And by the way, that's at least double what a normal professor would make, and he's only paid during the football season. He also does something else. He's got a gift for gab. He makes great relationships. How else do you get 4 jobs in 4 years traveling the country? He meets these players, Dan McGugin, Dad Gregory, and the great Willie Heston along the way. He convinces them all to join him immediately in 1901, the transfer portal, and they do. Back then, all legal. But they all transfer immediately to Michigan. They build a powerhouse. How's 550 points to 0? How does that do for you? 11-0. Touchdown's worth 5 points now. Think about that. Blew the doors off everyone, okay? Finished the season against Stanford, January 1st. The Tournament of Roses Committee in Pasadena, California wants to show off their town. Anyone been to Pasadena around that time of year? Yeah, I'd want to show it off too. But it's a new town outside LA. They want to get people. They have different types of events. They want to have a football game. Michigan goes, destroys Stanford. Here's the Rose Parade. And I want to point out one guy on there. It's a guy named Neil Snow in his Letterman sweater. Neil is the big man on campus. He plays multiple musical instruments. He loves sports. He's a multi-sport star, a captain, and apparently he likes something else a lot. And I'm talking about beer, okay? This ad shows up in his last game in 1902 as a baseball player. This is at the Bentley Historical Library. Who? Snow, of course, went since childhood. Any place it's sold to make me strong, Pale Select beer. He didn't know they had the ad. He didn't know about the ad. His friend showed him. He's mad. He writes the brewery. He's like, look, by the way, he says, I don't deny it. I love your beer, but I didn't want everybody in Ann Arbor knowing about it. They used his name, his image, his likeness. So lawyers, duels, gunfights, is that how they settle this? No, of course not. They sent him a case of the beer to his home on State Street. That's true. This is true. They sent him a case of the Pale Select beer. 1904, this scene, I love this scene. I could spend an hour talking about everything that's going on here, but there's one thing in particular that's going on, is this is a camera stand. They are filming it. This is Thomas Edison, the inventor, his production company, and they are filming this game. And this is the first end-to-end successful taping of a college football game. Why? Because there's no TVs. I don't think they were streaming back then. They want to show it in movie theaters. They think this is an idea, okay? So they tape it. And I want to warn you, this is ugly, this is brutal, and there's no passing, okay, in this game, or barely any passing, okay? I want you to just watch out, okay? I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. That's the wrong, oh, here it is. Okay, here it is. So there's the opening kickoff. And if you're saying, the film's a little grainy, it's the first football game filmed, okay? Give them a break. It's pretty good. Okay. So lots of guys sitting around, player getting definitely injured, taken off the field, right? We actually saw a lot of that on Saturday, unfortunately. They do a lot of what we call the tush push, where you just line up behind the player, push them. They actually had hooks on their pants where you would drag people into the end zone. And we got one more try. This looks remarkably like that series I just showed you, I got to say. They fail here. They can't pass the ball yet, though. They literally can't pass it. I know. Here, okay, watch this. Looks a lot like Mullings. There you go. Willie Heston scores a touchdown. Okay, but the game was brutal. And this got the attention of the U.S. president. The Eastern schools got together, and they said, the president summoned them and said, people are dying on the football field. Up to 45 players died during this period on the football field. Countless others maimed. He got them together to fix it. This led to the formation of what we know now as the NCAA. But it started with a meeting with the president. 1905, Collier's comes out with an expose on Michigan. They're buying football victories. They say the same thing about Chicago, Minnesota, everybody else. And then we have this. The public had come to consider the first 12 weeks of college were for football. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? I teach there, believe me. It's a lot about football. Students were becoming infected with the wrong idea of what college life really stood for. Who is this? A pundit? No, this is our school president. James Burrell Angel of Angel Hall said this. And this led to a meeting of the minds, get back together with the Big Ten and say, we got to do something about it. Stagg at the time was a full-time professor at Chicago. Yost was not. And they proposed reduce games to 5. By the way, 5 games, when would the season be over? Saturday. That's it. So they wanted 5 games. The faculty wanted to take control of the money. The faculty wanted to hire new coaches. That doesn't sound so bad now that I'm saying it out loud. I'd like to be a part of that. But they wanted to get rid of professional coaches. Michigan felt like the Big Ten was ganging up on us in a moment when we were really, really good. Okay, does it sound familiar? All right, we felt targeted. The students protested. To hell with the conference. What does Michigan do in 1908? Officially January of that year, Michigan leaves. Michigan left. Michigan was an independent for about 10 years. Said, see you later. We've had enough of this. All right, that was a little over a decade. That, I submit to you, was a pretty wild period in college athletics, okay? A lot happened. And by the way, this quote that I started off with, money, 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 that's actually a writer from 1894 who was decrying that money is going to ruin this game we love, Caspar Whitney, okay? So amidst all this chaos, there were some good things that happened, okay? Obviously, all these traditions started. We had fight songs, marching bands, the idea of cheerleaders, our many alma mater songs. By the way, Michigan beat Ohio State 86-0 in 1902. On the train ride home, one of their students, full of tears, wrote their alma mater, Carmen, Ohio, and that's what they sing in the corner. That was after getting beat 86-0 when touchdowns were worth 5 points. Okay, to Michigan. Rivalries started to churn. A conference, a big conference, massive crowds, ticket money, alumni associations, booster clubs. The notion of homecoming soon came. Students organizing and forming Block M's and things like that. We have maze-outs today. All that stuff started in this period. And something else started, a little tradition that I think is one of the coolest traditions in college football. All right, and we're talking about the Little Brown Jug. So I hope you enjoy me indulging me a little bit about the context. And we're going to start off with a few things. Now, this was called Myths and Mysteries, but I'm going to talk about a couple of things that we know, that were facts and kind of established facts, and talk about how and why I got involved in this. Fielding H. Yost. I talked about that first season. Turns out he still hadn't lost a game, and now we're in 1903. He's 29-0. Okay? He has struck fear. Used to be Stagg. Now it's this guy. Okay? He's 29-0, and he's setting up a game on October 31st, 1903 against Minnesota. Their coach, the Yale guy, the counter to Stagg himself, Doc Williams, is 10-0 in Minnesota. This game is played in Minneapolis. Here is the Michigan football team. This is at Lake Minnetonka at a resort place where they stayed before the game. It's the team. There's Yost. There's my man Willie Heston, and they're getting ready for the game. Here is the lineup. And they actually list here by total weight. I highlight this fellow, the left tackle. Then and today, that is often the biggest guy on the team. He is 6 foot, about 200 pounds, okay, with my keys in my pocket. So that looks like me. I'm the biggest guy on the 1903 football team, but that's Joe Curtis, okay. Back in Ann Arbor, how big is this? The Bell Phone Company arranges for a guy to be on a tower at the game, to cable back to Michigan through the telephone lines, back at University Hall in another site, live discussion of what's happening in the game. This predates sports radio. You can pay, you can sit there and watch, and the returns are blasted into a series of phones. People are picking up The guy's saying what's happening. People are answering the phone, and they're saying, Heston ran for 5 yards, and they're going back to their phones. They also have a big scoreboard where you can actually watch. They kind of move the ball as you go along. Everyone's cheering, knowing back then everyone's smoking. That was the thing. You probably couldn't even see the scoreboard. There was so much smoke. Okay. This man, Tommy Roberts, is the equipment manager. He is told to go out and buy a jug. Almost certainly, he bought a Red Wing jug. Anyone collects these things, has a big 5 on it. That denotes 5 gallons. There's the Red Wing symbol. They were very popular, and that is a particular thing that you knew you could buy in Minnesota, in that area, town of Red Wing. They're very collectible today, if you can find one. Michigan scores in the second half to go up 6-0. Near the end of the game, there's disputes about what time. A couple minutes left or a few seconds left, Minnesota scores to tie the game 6-6. Their fans crowd the field. The refs call the game right before it was over. Some people say if you're Minnesota, it was a few seconds, right? If you're Michigan, it was a few minutes, right? But it was before the game was over. They called it a 6-6 tie. Back in Ann Arbor, the reaction, Wolverines and Gophers struggled for 3 hours, and the result is a tie. Well, it was the greatest game in Western football history. Pretty good. You know, hey, great game. Yost finally didn't win a game, but it was, hats off, great game. Minnesota had a little bit of a different reaction. Yost has fallen. Most spectacular game, Williams is now supreme. I like these. Victory, though the score is tied. Yost and Michigan, all caps. Get out the all caps, Jimmy. Yost and Michigan are practically beaten. Practically, it's a tie, but. So they're feeling it, okay? They're feeling it, all right? So what happens to that jug we bought? It's sitting there in the locker room. This guy finds it. Oscar Munson, he's the custodian. He's the equipment manager. He's cleaning up after the game. He goes to the armory. The armory's still there, by the way, in Minneapolis. He finds the jug. He brings it to this guy, Louis Cook. He's their athletic director. They're still excited from the game. He says, hey, man, Yost left his jug. He's got a Scandinavian accent. He says, Yost left his jug. And they take it in, and they paint it up. On one side, of course, Oscar, ever the good employee. First, he says, not to be taken from the gymnasium, in case anyone has any ideas. This is important, okay? This is important. Michigan jug, captured, in quotes, by Oscar, date of the game. The other side, the score. Minnesota, 6. Now, this wasn't one of those things where you're writing and you run out of room. You're like, happy anniversary. Oh, shoot, too long. No. 6. Michigan, tiny little 6 to signify the thing. All right, 1909, we know the teams played for it, and they've played for it ever since, and this spawned the whole idea of a rivalry trophy. We have spittoons, we have slabs of ribs, bells, spittoons, axes, wheels, broken chairs. Okay, there's over 155 of these and counting across college football. People have a tendency to even add them now. So it started this tradition. And why are we talking about it, Dooley? You have one more time. Yeah, century later. I knew we were coming up on the 100th anniversary the first time we played for it, and one of the things I like to do is research this stuff and ask questions. Curious? We knew at the surface level what the story was because it was published by the athletic department, and Minnesota had a version. They were pretty close. So I wanted to find out everything I can because there were some interesting things in there, and I knew we had this wonderful resource at the Bentley Historical Library where I could find some answers and maybe get some more stories around this. I wanted to tell the story. So the official history back in 2009 was Michigan bought the jug for fear that Minnesota would poison its water. Very plausible. This was a heated rivalry. This is brutal, right? This is brutal football back then. We left it. They found it. Yost somehow wanted it back. He wrote Minnesota, said, hey, I want my jug back. I heard you took our jug. But he was rebuffed. If you want it, you'll have to win it back. You've probably heard this story if you're here. And Minnesota kept it until 1909. Michigan beat Minnesota in 1909, and the teams have played for it ever since. That was the common, story of the jug origin. But there was more. There was more. The trophy disappeared from the trophy case in the Michigan building, administration building, from 1930 to 1934. It was found behind a clump of bushes by a gas station attendant. This is the story. You know, I think people stopped reading after that. I'm like, what? And the authenticity of the original jug was confirmed. I'm like, wait a minute. So the more I started to dig, I found out that no one really had bothered to look into this stuff, as far as I know. Maybe they didn't have the resources like the Bentley Historical Library at their disposal, but I wanted to find out. And so this surface level story kind of just stood there for the sands of time. All right, so I set out to find more, and I went to the Bentley Historical Library, but my initial searches, and we had the internet back then, right? It only raised more questions, so I poured through the daily yearbooks, photos, letters to find this stuff. And I looked for stuff in 1903. I didn't find a lot, but I found the Michigan yearbook, and this is what Doc Williams said. So this is the yearbook that covers the 1909 game, that time they played. Doc Williams is quoted in there. So the Michigan Ganders had made much of the jug during that season. It went everywhere with them. I'm like, wait a minute. After each game, the score was emblazoned on the side like a trophy. In addition, we stole it. I'm like, what? Okay. All right. So I find a Michigan Daily reference. Yeah, it had gained great place in the hearts and the rooters. So the fans were involved now. It couldn't be replaced. We had this special magic jug. It was the rabbit's foot, the 7 or 11 point combination. Its loss was irreplaceable. This was devastating when we lost it. I'm like, well, that's not, okay. Then this is a beauty. In 1903, took a team to Minnesota. Great game, 6-6 tie. After it was over, Michigan missed one of its water jugs. It was found broken. Doc Williams, then Gopher coach, agreed to replace it, but required Michigan prove its ownership by like, I'm going, what is going on here? This is weird, right? So I find an internet hit on Michigan Today. Michigan Today, respected, reporting on Nobel Prize winners and groundbreaking arts and culture, museum exhibits. They probably have stories about the observatory, right? This is for fancy people. They have to, someone did a story in Michigan Today, certainly, that dug in a little bit on some of these stories, right? I find this picture of this brown jug with 1903. I've seen photos. It looks nothing like anything in a photo. Sure, it has the year on it, but it doesn't look anything like anything I've ever seen. We have the original jug painted, right? And I am going, what is going on here? What is happening? So abandon that. I've seen these pictures. I've seen the photos. I start to look a little closer at all the photos, and suddenly I realize something, that this jug is not this jug. And that jug from Michigan Today, I still have no idea where they found this jug. I have no clue what this is. It has nothing to do with any of this, but they published it. Okay, so I see all the photos. Now I'm starting to question everything. 1903. So I go back. Here's that official history. The first thing I look at, did they buy this jug to poison its water? And I find no evidence. No quotes, no nothing, specifically about poisoning our water or fear for it. You would think that would be a storyline. It wasn't. The area was renowned for its jugs. Logic, I know a lot about that history. It was very fierce and competitive. But let's be honest, poisoning seems like a little bit of a stretch, okay? But not totally impossible. It's a long trip. We do have this quote from the trainer, Keen Fitzpatrick, that carrying water to which the men are accustomed is a big nuisance and of no practical benefit. He said, we actually did it when we went to Philadelphia, but we didn't find any advantages gained. He's actually not talking about poisoning. He's actually talking about, like when you go to Mexico, and you're worried about the water, there were regional differences in the water supply back then that they were concerned about. But he's basically saying, we didn't find any benefit from it. And by the way, so it certainly wasn't, they weren't worried about sabotage. Conclusion, Michigan bought the jug because they needed something for their water, okay? So let's keep going. Decided he wanted it back. Why would Yost want it back? It's a great question. I have no quotes. And Yost, I use another word, but Yost never shut the F up. In letters, in correspondence, he would talk. Go look for a picture of Yost. How many do we have at the Bentley? Thousands? At least I don't know, hundreds. He liked his picture taken. He liked to be out there. There's no quotes that I could find. Not to say he wouldn't say anything. Why would he care, though? This was Lloyd Carr used to say Yost was a frugal man, which I think is funny. But this is a 25 to 30-cent jug. They might cost a nickel a gallon for the jug back then, maybe 30 cents. Tickets were $2, $3. We know that Michigan made $14,000 for the game. Guess what? They could have replaced the jug 42,000 times back home. Okay. Spite, maybe. He heard that they painted it somehow. Maybe he wanted it back because they took it as a trophy. Okay. Even for Yost, who, if there's one guy who might do something like that, it might be Yost. Even, that's a stretch. How would it be returned, by the way? When? By mail? Are they going to mail it back? We want our jug back. Are they going to send it back? Doubtful. There's no evidence. Logic doesn't dictate that he would care at all. That doesn't make it so, though. Okay? One more. He said, if you want it, you will have to win it back. There's no evidence of this either. There's no evidence of a reply. If Michigan really wanted their back, the jug back, would Minnesota really say no? When would they win it back, by the way, is another question. There was no 19-4 game on the schedule. Most likely, they would have had to bring it to Ann Arbor for a rematch. Would they have done this? There's no evidence. Okay, so I dug harder, and I found another story. Michigan came back in 1909. In Doc Cook's memoir, the guy who painted the jug, he said, look, he talked about the jug. He says, I hung it from a rope in my office for 6 years. I found this line. I dug everywhere to try to find a photo of the jug hanging in his office from this period, and I found it. There it is. Wow. Yeah. There's the jug. He hung it above his office in a rope, so the story is starting to make sense. This guy knows what he's talking about. That's his office in the armory. And two things came out. Doc Williams' memoir says Doc Cook simply brought the jug down. He wanted to fire up the crowd. Cook and his captain brought it to Yost in Michigan and say, why don't we play for it? Probably just for that game. Michigan won the game. They had dinner afterwards. And the most likelihood is that they decided, you know what? Why don't we just give it to the winner every time we play? Okay, by the way, this was unique because Michigan was not in the Big Ten. And Minnesota got in a little trouble for scheduling these two games with us. They scheduled us again in 1910. The Big Ten passed a rule, I kid you not, called the non-intercourse rule in Big Ten competition because of these two games we played. All right, myth. I am convinced these were drummed up to build up the tradition of the rivalry. That's fine. They're fun stories. But we got to talk about the 30s real quick. Disappeared from the trophy case from 30 to 34, found by a gas station attendant, authenticity confirmed. Interesting. I went to 1930 where they said this story happened. Nothing. No mention of the jug being gone. In fact, they mentioned the jug game and all that stuff, nothing at all. Okay, I went to 1934 where the jug was supposed to appear. Certainly, there must have been a big story about the jug being recovered, nothing. Went to 1931, found something. Jug indeed stolen. So the year was wrong. It was indeed stolen from the administration building, which is still there on State Street. And a week or so before the game, I kid you not, a Cadillac, 4 guys, wearing goggles, go up to a gas station on the outside of town. This is near where Washtenaw, just up the road, and Stadium split. They drop off a jug. May not be genuine. Yost will take a look at it for us, because Yost, of course, probably knows what the original jug looks like. Media gets a hold of this. They flock to the gas station. There it is. There's our guy holding the jug. They take pictures of him. Took a little while to get there. It looks like it's night. Okay, he's holding the jug. By the way, this is the Bear Claw coffee. If you recognize the building, right? Jim Harbaugh recognized this when I gave this to the team, by the way. That's the Bear Claw coffee before I showed this, by the way. Okay. Yost confirms that 1931 jug that was at the gas station is indeed the original. Okay. 1933. Another jug shows up on campus. 2 separate jugs, 2 separate stories. Another jug. Yost says, never mind, this one is the real one. Minnesota accused Yost the whole time of having a jug. Minnesota was getting really good at this time, by the way. Michigan had retained the jug in those games. apparently a temporary jug or a fake jug, the one found at the gas station. Yost says this is the real one. So this is wrong. It's actually 1931 to 1933. The clump of bushes, that's mixed up. That's conflating two stories that got lost over time, mixed up. But then we have this question of authenticity. All right, so is today's jug the OJ rather, the original jug, right? John Falk, legendary equipment manager. I talked to every living equipment manager I could find, including the great John Falk, who was hired by Bo Schembechler, who started around 1973, and previous predecessors going back to people that worked with Henry Hatch, who's in the photo that we used for this piece. I talked to Minnesota equipment managers, a legend, Dick Mattson, who had ties to older equipment managers. Every single one of them said today's jug is the real jug, that it was never broken. Okay. Took photos, was able to go to Schembechler Hall and take photos of it, did a photo overlay. I am no expert in photo overlays, but I did a crude, what if we match these up and translate them? It looks close, but I knew better to say there's a lot of things that can be done with photos to manipulate them. I wasn't trying to, but it looks, something's going on here, it looks close. All right, I brought out the big guns. I made phone calls. I called some of those fancy people that I'm talking about here at the University of Michigan in the art department. I said, I got a problem. We got a trophy here at Schembechler Hall, and I need an expert. And we have an art department. He says, you know what? You know who you need to talk to? I go, who? I go, you ever been to Greenfield Village or the Henry Ford Museum? I'm like, yeah, as a kid, they made me go. It was fun. I liked it. They have a master potter there. His name is Ryan Forey. He's an expert in stoneware pottery from that time period. That's the Henry Ford, all their artifacts, all the things they collect. He makes pottery there. He talks about it. I bring him to Schembechler Hall, right? Lloyd Carr was on a visit to Greenfield Village and ran into this guy. And he said that he checked out the jug. Somehow Lloyd Carr and I ended up talking about it. And basically, Lloyd Carr goes, what are you doing? Where did you find this guy? Okay, so I found him. I brought him in. He looks at it. Experts, respect. Experts look at things. When you're staring at jugs all day, I said it, you see things that other people don't see. And he did. He saw the pitch of the handle. He could see the original stoneware underneath it. He noticed a nick on the original that matched up to the photo that he said, from a maker's perspective, that's interesting that I can see this, this, this. He found another thing that when you look at the jug is clear as day today. I didn't see it because, again, I'm not looking. He noticed some other form of an M underneath the paint of the Minnesota M. So I went out and looked at photos, and I found a program. Thankfully, the 1923 Michigan program depicted the Minnesota jug facing out on the program, but more importantly, here's their captain in 1927 with this older style jug. A lot of evidence. When there were reports that in the 20s, when it was traveling, it was broken and repaired. There was a claim from Oscar himself before he died that it was replaced. But keep in mind, the jug changed hands. Minnesota, for a long period, didn't have it. Then they had it for a long period. Okay, it's fragile. Verdict. I tell people this. This is not a scientific, study, but there's a really good chance that at least survived from the 20s. And if it survived from the 20s, we didn't play that much. There's a high, high likelihood that the jug that we play for today is indeed the original, based on everything we found. Ryan Forey, the pottery expert, believes it is, based on what he's seen. All right, 2023, I gave this talk to the Michigan football team. Here's, and you guys know what happened with that team after I gave that talk, right? I'm not taking credit. I'm kind of waiting for one of my 4 rings, maybe just one of them. They all got 4, right? Okay. Here's what Jim Harbaugh has to say.
Little brown jug. Yeah. How much have you talked to guys about the little brown jug?
Oh yeah, you've been to our TTGs. We had you were Michigan State. We had a great forget the professor's name who came in and messed that up, but came in and gave a wonderful presentation on the history of the brown jug. everything about it, where it was made, how, that Yost and the fellows left the water jug there, and Minnesota kept it, and when we asked for it back, they said you could come play for it, and whoever wins gets to keep the jug, and the proof that it is the original jug.
Mm-hmm.
There's been some controversy there, but that seems to be proven.
Was that Greg Dooley?
It was Greg Dooley.
Yes.
You are the man. What a Michigan man you are.
What's that?
Greg
Well,
Dooley. He was fantastic. Just fantastic.
He is.
Slideshow, presentation, really good speaker. I mean,
Yeah.
you folks with the great speaking voices and the articulation. It's he was tremendous. Very, very, very educational.
Well, Coach, I appreciate it.
You heard it from Coach Harbaugh. By the way, one of the things I tell the players whenever I speak to them, and this man was in my history college athletics class, Chase Winovich, when I said, hold the jug with 2 hands. He did not hold the jug with 2 hands. And can you spy who the national champion is compared to these two? This man is the captain. They won the national championship. Why should you care? I tell this to the players, I'll tell it to you. As Michigan people and fans, I know there's probably some Minnesota people watching, but when it's gone, believe me, you care. They play for some other trophies. This is a symbol. Obviously, it's a throwback from Minnesota. Very cultured people. But this is the trophy and the symbolism of beating Michigan that they want. They have a cherished place for it in their trophy case, which is widely often empty, fortunately for us. You will miss it when it's gone. Remember, this is our jug. Lloyd Carr used to point this out. It's our property. I don't want to get lawyers involved here, but no one's disputing that we bought this, okay, back in 1903. It's our jug. It belongs to Michigan, okay? It has a lot of value, by the way, if you really want to get technical. The spirit's inside. I love this. Doc Kutz said this later before he died. He was a very energetic guy. He used to do the thing with a cane where he would hold his cane and he could jump over it still holding the cane as a very old man. He said, I think that the jug has been filled with the spirits, the countless players who have fought for it on the gridiron. I love that. I like to say it has the DNA of college football on it, probably literally. Okay, this was a water jug that undoubtedly Willie Heston drank out of in 1903. Okay, it's traveled games. So many people who support our teams, fans, have touched it. Captains, Heisman Trophy winners, future presidents, undoubtedly. All the people who've painted it, including my friend Jill Gordon, who still paints it today. She's planning on coming up from Florida, knock on wood, with a hurricane. Okay, there's John Falk in Minnesota. And I love to say that. In closing, a couple words. The whole premise of the history of college athletics gets to a little bit of what Andrew was talking about. This is a uniquely American thing, these crowds like this. It's very, very uniquely American that a lower level sport team plays in bigger stadiums. I have a friend from London, Giles, very English. He knows who Tom Brady is. Tried to explain to him, no, he played this big stadium. What are you talking about? Was that like a prep school? No, Giles. 110,000 people watch this man. That can't be. But it can be. And it gets bound to a couple things. At Michigan, we want to do things great. We want to do all things. Above the Union is this statue when you walk in on State Street. One side is the athlete. The athlete looks down toward the athletic campus. Next is the scholar. The scholar looks down toward Central Campus. All right? And so one of the things I tell my students is that this whole notion of public education is a special thing and it's precious. And it was a novel idea by my man TJ, or Teej for short, if you really want to go. And I'm talking about Thomas Jefferson. And he wrote 1787, the Northwest Ordinance. And one of its key ideas was we have this wild area in the West. How are we going to settle this? How are they going to be happy? How are they going to build, be religious people and build good government? We need to educate them. Monarchies don't necessarily want everyone educated. People who control people don't want the public out there searching for truth, right? So that's why in Angel Hall today, Article 3 of the Northwest Ordinance is scrawled. That's how important it was to the University of Michigan. Why do I bring this up? Because this place, that idea, that notion empowered generations to ask questions and to search for truth, even skyward, upstairs. in the stars, in this building. But not just there. And I'm talking about the observatory, of course. Sometimes I think we also need to look backward, ask hard questions, question history as accepted, and find the truth. And that's all I got for you today. Thank you so much, everyone. Appreciate it. We got time for Q&A, or did I use all the time?
We do indeed have some time for Q&A.
Great.
I'm, as the host, going to take advantage to ask you some questions I have before opening it up to everybody
Awesome. Thank you all for being here and listening to me. I really appreciate it. If you guys want to connect with me, by the way, before I forget, I got some business cards up here, and I'm pretty easy to find if you look. So, all right. What's going on? What do we got?
Well, I have a lot of questions because you covered a lot of ground here, but I'm curious about a couple of things, really. You talked about how obviously there are so many trophies now, but was there any reaction outside of Michigan or Minnesota when the Brown Jug started? Did you see any coverage at other schools? Like, what was the first school that said, hey, they've got a Brown Jug, we want a wagon wheel or an axe or something?
Well, this college football is definitely a copycat thing. We copy plays, we copy schemes, we copy ideas, we copy stadiums, Notre Dame, right? All this stuff. Notre Dame copied, they were inspired by Michigan Stadium. I do remember quite a few rivalry trophies because even in the 20s, they started to refer to the jug as historic. They started to use words like historic and special, and that's when a lot of those stories started to come out about it. So I know, like, the old Oaken bucket that Indiana and Purdue play for, I think it started with some of the other Big Ten teams to copy what they did. So that's where some of those early inspirations came from. But it's definitely started right here.
And the other thing I was thinking about as I was sitting here is you don't hear about rivalry trophies in other sports. Michigan State basketball, huge rivalry, no trophy, nothing like the Paul Bunyan. What is it about football, do you think, rather than other sports?
There's obviously the history. I think there's something unique that it's the once-a-year matchup typically. Now, of course, we can play Ohio State 3 times now in the current format. People wonder, is that going to ruin our current world college football? And by the way, do Michigan and Ohio State play for something? Does anybody know? The Big Ten championship. Okay, so that, I think the unique nature of the football schedule and the 1-year wait for the one game is a little unique to football, where it's that moment on that Saturday for 3 hours and there's a winner and all the stakes are on that one game, like those Thanksgiving games.
That makes perfect sense, I guess.
Yeah.
How many times do you Michigan State? Twice a year, maybe more in the Big Ten tournament? So
Right.
I have just sort of one other question, then we open it up to the audience. So you talked about how this is sort of a Wild West period, playing players transferring all over the place. How did that sort of wind down? And do you think there are any lessons in that for where college athletics are headed now, or is it?
That's a great question. So how did this period settle down? They never, ever, ever stopped paying players. They just got smarter about it, okay? Some schools followed the rules more than others. Some places, I had someone come in who works for the athletic department now, who came from the South and said, and I don't take this the wrong way, but they say there's dumb money down there. In other words, here's the money, and they don't ask questions. People at Michigan ask a lot of questions. They ask about tax deductibility, and where am I getting for my money? Where's my return? There's more questions that are involved, but that's been going on forever. The game did settle out a little bit, but it's always had different struggles. The popularity of the game faced some real crisis in the 1930s. Sometimes people ask me, would you ever write a book? And I think if I did, it would probably be about that period, because that's the period when some schools in the 20s and 30s, when people started building stadiums, Michigan was actually a little slow relative to some other schools to build Michigan Stadium, have a 100th anniversary in 1927. But some schools said no, and one of those schools is Chicago. You know this. Chicago's not in the Big Ten anymore. And they said, no, we're not doing this, right? And the game, so there were some decisions made. How much do we really want to invest in this? And some kept going. And then life happened. You had the Depression, you had World War II, and it fundamentally changed our view of how we look at football, and it slowly evolved. Then TV came in. This is all things I talk about in my NIL class. TV came to play in a different form and a different level of money hit, and it really changed the game. As you got into the 70s, lawsuits, we were able to break away from the NCAA, and teams were able to now get money for their own TV contracts, and it slowly built and escalated to where it is today. So I don't know if it ever really settled down, you know, Andrew, to answer your question. It just evolved and changed and twisted.
Well, we'll see what happens. But
Yeah, I don't know. That's a great question. What's going to happen? I don't know. We explore all this stuff in my NIL class. So
you might have to lengthen the semester so you have an extra week as things develop.
Well, it's funny, we always start off with a headline. It's actually very easy. It's uncomfortable as a teacher because I don't know exactly what it's going to be, but I have a blank slide. We meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays, and it's called NIL in the headlines, and I go, I don't know what it is, but I'm going to probably find out Monday or Tuesday morning because there's something that's going to happen, and we talk about it. Yep.
Actually, you know what? I lied. I do have another question for you. Sorry.
Okay. $5.
I know you teach a lot of athletes in your class, and just thinking about this, you know, how do they react to this story? You know, this issue of the jug, you know, because I'm sure they hear the story all the time and from their coaches and things, and then you sort of complicate that. How does they react to that, and how do they react to the sort of issues with NIL?
Okay. The history stuff they enjoy. I will say, I'll confess, I was a student, I was in their shoes. I didn't care about any of this stuff when I was their age. Your loyalty and your feelings, look at the crowd today. That beautiful crowd. But there's not a ton of 18-year-old people in here that want to see this, right? It grows stronger, and your loyalty and your interest level and all this stuff grows a lot stronger as you get older, as you move away from the university and your college days. So there's that. The NIL stuff hits them a little harder because we're talking about issues of fairness, competitiveness, gender, race, all of these things that are at the intersection of what's going on right now for how payment is. There's talk we're about to, I didn't hear what the judge said today if she spoke, about to have revenue sharing. Who's getting the money? How? Ohio State already for their sports. I have those athletes in my class. I'll tell you this, from my standpoint, I've become way more invested in interest in the 29 other sports or the 28 other sports in football at Michigan since I started teaching, after I've learned their wonderful stories and these incredible stories of how a lot of these athletes who never would have gotten to Michigan without being an athlete on their sport. And I'm not just talking about the major sports you know about, but it's such a great opportunity for them, and they're some of my favorite students. And so just hearing their perspective on this is fascinating for me as a teacher, and it's taught me a lot.
Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Now we'll open it up to questions for both the in-person and the online audience. Please, if you have a question, please raise your hand, and one of our docents will bring you a microphone.
Yeah, hi.
Which worries you the most, especially in terms of the other sports, the NIL or the conference realignment? Because the conference realignment seems like it could potentially destroy the lesser sports.
Yeah, I don't know that you can separate the two completely because the money is dictating whether we're going to break off into separate conferences for, say, football going off and breaking off the realignment. I am concerned about the health and welfare of student athletes who now have to travel out west. They'll work it out. Michigan has a lot of resources. One of the hard parts, though, at teaching at Michigan is I tend to lead with what's happening here at Michigan, and Michigan has more resources. One thing, people complain about NIL and say, oh, we don't have enough, we don't do this. One thing that Michigan has is incredible resources for the health and welfare of our student athletes. When you're hurt, you see a doctor. Okay, at other schools, you see a trainer, then another trainer. And I'm not knocking, but we have some of the best care, academic advisors, all this stuff for student athletes in the support system. So we'll figure out a way to make it work. I do wonder about the other schools and the other sports. The other thing is Michigan can survive. We might even add a women's hockey team, which is very expensive amidst all of this uncertainty. It's a crazy time to add a sport. Michigan State just cut their swim dive program a couple years ago, and their fans went nuts. We might add a sport, an expensive sport, in the midst of all this. What about Indiana? What about Northwestern? What about Purdue? Who are we going to play? These are questions I ask. I think revenue sharing is going to fix some of the issues with equity and payments to players, and we're going to work that out. But NIL is never going away. That is a human right. Athletes have the right. Neil Snow had the right to get paid for that beer ad. They used his name to promote their beer. He should get paid for it. Because he's 19 and he's a college athlete, makes no sense. I love the story. Jeremy Bloom, Olympic skier. He was a mogul skier back in the day. He also played football for Colorado. He's the same age, same everything, plays one sport in a different class. He can take all the endorsements he wants and still be a skier in the Olympics, but he can't play football. Made no sense. So I hope that answered your question. Yeah.
I can talk loud enough. Okay, I just wanted to comment. I didn't realize that you were like the founder of the M. Victor's blog.
Uh-oh.
And it's just an amazing blog. If you're not aware of it,
Some people might say manifesto.
no, I've tracked that for years, and the articles are just wonderful. And so
Thank you very much.
very much for it.
You can also thank these two guys over here for a lot of that content from the Bentley Historical Library. That was it? That was the best question.
So thanks. I loved your talk. I went to Minnesota undergrad, but I've been here for almost 30 years, and so I love the story of the Little Brown Jug. And I was just looking up the history, and so it must have been 2005 when Minnesota won the jug. I thought I should go to a Halloween party as the Brown Jug, and I tried to find a picture of it on the internet, 20 years ago, and I found a website that said, the Little Brown Jug is a trophy given annually to Michigan when they beat Minnesota in football. And so my question is, as Michigan has been so dominant in the last decades, what's the meaning of this rivalry game anymore? I wear my Minnesota gear to the stadium, and people try to give me a hard time, and I'm like, hey, if we don't win at least once a decade, is it really a rivalry?
Right. Well, there's rivalry, then there's the jug, and I do separate the two. I will say something, though, and I like to tell people this. It's very true that Michigan's dominant recently, certainly the last 50 years. Guess what? No one has dominated Michigan for a period of time more than the mid-30s to the 40s that Minnesota did. No one. Not Ohio State before we turned things around. In a 9 or 10-year stretch, I think Minnesota claims 4 or 5 national titles during that stretch. These were powerful matchups. So I know that was a long time ago, but I know that. I think some other people know that. Like, there was a point, yes, so today, what does it matter? Obviously, being the first matters. And like I said, believe me, it suddenly matters so much more when occasionally, maybe Saturday, maybe the next time, Minnesota wins. It comes clear into focus how important this is. And sometimes maybe we need a little of that. But I think it's important. It's still listed certainly as a rival to me in Michigan. But yeah, so it's certainly taken a little luster off it. We probably wouldn't have had the trophy in the first place had this not been this huge game that it was, right? So the intensity of the game matters, but the jug will endure, I assure you.
One from our online audience.
Leroy asks, when did the tradition of the football team visiting the pediatric hospitals start? I think it's a beautiful thing. That's a great question. That's a curveball, but I think I know the answer. I think that started when the Fab Five was here in the early 90s. I believe, a guy named Ed Bouillon, who is a local business owner, had a daughter at Mont Hospital, and some of the Fab Five players, including Juwan Howard, our former coach, went up there to see her. I believe that's the story. And she was inspired. He was inspired later to fund that and have a routine. I believe is it Tuesday nights or Thursday nights? One of Thursday nights to go up there, and it's a wonderful tradition, and people probably don't talk about it a lot. And it's one of those things where I've actually been up there on one of those nights because I think I wrote about it on mvictors.com. And but it's one of just these wonderful things that people do here in this community that you don't hear a ton about, but it really changes people's, and it's a special thing for a lot of the families. Yep. Great question.
Maybe another online if we have.
So the next question is, when will Division I college football break away from the NCAA?
Yeah, well, it's funny. So, I told this story briefly, the origins with Teddy Roosevelt and all that good stuff, right? But people forget, what is the NCAA? Is it this amorphous blob in Indianapolis of a bunch of bureaucrats? Yes. But the NCAA burned, yes, but the NCAA, you have a condo, you have a house, you have a homeowners association. That's really what it is. It serves on behest of the homeowners, of the condo people. It sets up rules, so I can't have my buddy, Jamie, park his RV in my front yard for 6 months during football season. All of that would be awesome, Jamie. But my neighbors would freak out. But we made some rules together. Maybe I don't agree with them, all of them, but these are the rules we live by. Our representative to the NCAA is Sansaona, okay? He's our school president. So it serves at behest of, so the NCAA is us. It is all the major schools. Now, when are we breaking away? The NCAA was not set up. The NCAA is about money, believe me. They count money, they keep money, they have an organization that needs to be funded. Their last money source today, major money source, is one thing. It's the NCAA tournament. It's 3 weeks in March. It's the last thing they actually own. They net about $1 billion. Most of that gets distributed back to the schools, okay? But their influence, their power, their structure was not designed to manage billions and billions of dollars and all the considerations that weigh in when money comes into play. It was not designed to do that. They are not equipped to do that. Someone does need to do it. Someone does need to do it. Someone needs to set the guardrails for how we're going to proceed. They are not the right organization as they exist today. So I do think there is some call for breaking off and figuring out a new way of governing what makes sense. And probably it makes sense for the football teams and maybe some of the other revenue sports to break off. I do think there's a point when the players should be able to collectively bargain and state what they want. Okay, whether they're employees or not, they should be able to state what they want, and then there can be a discussion around things like quarterbacks leaving in the middle of the season and things like that, and say, hey, look, we're going to give you this, we're going to give you that, but we need a commitment out of you. It'll take a lot of stress off the coaches. What that looks like, I don't know. And I hope I didn't just campaign to be one of these people, because I do not want to do it. All right.
Final online question?
Harold asks, you mentioned that the brown jug was valuable. Can you place a monetary value in the jug?
So our boy Bacon, he wrote a book, and I'm quoted in there, and he asked me, and I think I said around $30,000, but this book was written about 10 years ago or so. It's a great question. By the way, this is not the original. This is not the trophy they play for. This is our trophy case display. This sits today between us friends and everyone online, I guess, in this recording. This sits in Sharon Moore's office when he has recruits, when he has people in, he has a bunch of relics in there. I think this could be the gas station jug. Yeah, I think this might be the gas station jug, so for what it's worth. So what is the real jug worth? Obviously, it's one of a kind. I watch Antiques Roadshow, Pawn Stars, American Pickers. And actually, I'll say, if I can add, if we have a minute, one of the reasons I kind of attached myself to the jug is it's probably the way I think. I like to see things, touch things, and like see a tangible piece of it inspires me a little bit. And I have an affinity for memorabilia, so one of the earliest things I did on invictors.com was I found really cool things on eBay. And I dug in and explored, well, what's this from? What is it about? This is interesting. Michigan things. So, but when you value stuff, you want comparables. Obviously, you have to know the market. This is one of a kind. You know, this is like a one of a kind Rembrandt painting. You know, what's the value? I'm guessing it would fetch six figures if it was sold today. $100,000 for the original plus. Way more than the 30 I estimated before. I wouldn't pay that, but I pay a lot for it. And I got to start with myself. My wife's here in the back, about to choke me.
But I would love to have this in my office. But where it belongs, however, is protected and on the sideline in exchange between these two wonderful teams. By the way, people ask me, are we running out of room for the scores all the time? Well, with the new conference realignment, 18 teams, we have plenty of room. We actually started painting on the other side, on the M. You see that new section there? That was new. We have room below. We actually have a little more room on the real jug below. And keep in mind, this thing has been repainted several times over its history. So no, I'm not going to Stanley Cup it and make it bigger and bigger and bigger. I would just repaint it. The last thing is, what if we play Minnesota twice? Well, we did. I can't see it here. We played Minnesota twice in 1926. The jug was on the line twice. It's up there. The jug was on the line twice. So yes, if we met Minnesota, say, in the Big Ten championship game, good luck. Again, I say, if they care what I say, we play for it once again.
I think we have time for one more question, if anybody has any.
Where is the 55-yard line?
Great question. Field used to be 110 yard long. But they stopped that, I think, around the time they added the passing rule. One of the things they added to make the game safer when Teddy Roosevelt got involved, it's actually a funny story. The first thing they wanted to do was just widen the field, make it wider, right? So here's the quarterback, make it wider so if you run, there's more room, it's a little safer, it's not all snug together. And Harvard's in the back of the room going, excuse us, we just built a stadium, and the stadium goes right up to the sideline. What are you doing? So they said, how about passing? And I go, okay, that sounds better. So they passed the ball. But the field used to be 110 yards long. They changed it to 100. So when Michigan, Yost had a decision. He was athletic director in the early 20s, and other teams started to build stadiums. And he had a lot of older fans. He used to write, and this was well after the field was made to 100 yards. People would write, can I get tickets, can I get tickets, can I get tickets? And the ticket demand is one of the things that really changed his mind. He thought maybe we can just keep adding on to our existing field, Ferry Field. And it was the tickets, but some of the requests for tickets were for 55-yard line ticket seats, so, which was great back in the day. But yeah, there used to be a 55-yard line, primo. Section 23.5 if you're keeping score at home. Yeah.
What is the square pattern of the field?
Yeah, so for a period they actually had the field in a grid. It kind of defined where the runners could go and where you lined up the ball, kind of like extra hash marks and things like that. People think that's where the term gridiron came from. I don't think it actually is. An old gridiron is a device used to put over a flame or fire. Actually looks like a modern football field quite a bit. I think it actually came from that. But so for a short period of time, some of the fields were in those like 5-yard square chunks. Yep.
Huh, I have to admit I did not know that.
I have all kinds of stuff. Sadly, my students are very aware of all this too. Most of my lectures are like this, and they are packed with all kinds of information. I didn't realize, I just thought, well, if I said it, they must know it, and I can test them on it. And I learned very quickly when I started teaching, I can't just do that. I have to kind of go, all right, I know I got up in here, and I was running around, and I had my water bottle, and I run around, just like I did today, move all around. The next lecture, I have to go, all right, here are the 20 most important things I want you to remember. And so we call it rapid review, and Alejandro has seen it, but I actually lay down, these are the most important things of all of these crazy stories I just told you. Yep. But everything was important today, don't get me wrong, okay?
Well, I actually think we have one most important final question.
All right.
What's the score going to be Saturday?
Ooh, I would say Michigan's going to win, how about 19-6?
That seems reasonable with some of the offense I've seen.
Yeah, I think it's going to be an ugly, brutal game with no passing, like I showed you earlier. So,
Well, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank all of you, both in person and online. That was really great.